Hell Let Loose Vietnam made me think about Call of Duty, but not for the reason you think. When I was growing up, I watched my little brother play a lot of Call of Duty because watching your sibling play games on the family computer is a sacred right. Anyway, one of my most vivid memories of watching him play is this specific house in the Carentan map. Because eventually my family took a trip to Normandy, and I swear to God, we saw this house, or what I thought was this house. In retrospect, my teen brain probably was just making connections between media and things that I was seeing, and this is just typical Normandy architecture, but it's still the most lasting memory that I have of watching my brother play games. Doing level design for a video game is much more complicated than just transposing a real street into pixel form, and it's especially complicated for games that are translating real historical battles into PvP maps. So I sat down with two developers from the upcoming Hell Let Loose Vietnam to learn how they're trying to capture this complicated war and its complicated geography. They told me about the surprising ways in which making a war game set in Vietnam can be easier, as well as about the games that inspired them. If you're not familiar with it, Hell Let Loose is a PvP game where teams of 50 players face off against each other in historical battles. But instead of a free-for-all, each team is composed of platoons with really strict ranks. That means that communication is super important because coordination between these units can only be done by officers radioing other officers or commanders. That level of grit has attracted a player base who care a lot about historical battles and weapons and strategy.
We did a new map for Hell Let Loose called Mortain, which is the map for the World War II game set in France. Just before the map came out, there was a particular post from one of the community members, and they said, I've just been out and bought a book based on that battle, and the book they'd been out and bought was the same book we used to do all the reference for it.
World War II, you're often fighting front line to front line. Potentially you're in the middle of a city, or oftentimes, you'll be in the field and it's fighting for every meter. Whereas in Vietnam, the conflicts oftentimes sprawled throughout different areas, and the front lines are much less solid that you'd find on a traditional tactical map for World War II. It's been really interesting to look at those operations and see how we can try and recreate some of that feeling.
I'm Matt White. I am the studio creative director.
I'm Keenan Southern. I'm a level designer at Expression Games working on Hell Let Loose Vietnam.
What's really satisfying when you know that people are being inspired by the work we've done as a team and they want to expand their own level of knowledge and appreciation, keeping that piece of history alive.
Vietnam as a setting is obviously super complicated to approach. The war was controversial even in its own time. It was a devastating tragedy for Vietnam. It was a historical bungle for the United States. And on top of all of that, it was recent enough that people directly affected by it or involved in it are still alive. But it also means that there are some unexpected ways that Expression Games had an easier time approaching Vietnam than they did World War II.
Unlike World War II, there's a lot of excellent photography and video from the period that's in colour compared to World War II. That's really useful. There was more honest media coverage of the Vietnam War compared to World War II. So in World War II, a lot of our time is spent deciphering the difference between propaganda and truth. And with Vietnam War, that's quite different.
And then we find first-hand accounts as best we can. We always try and look out for either any of the US military or the NVA military that were there, and we try and get the accounts of all the first-hand experiences.
Those first-hand documents make it much easier to conceptualize maps for the battles that appear in the game. But as I've written about before with regards to Notre Dame and its appearance in Assassin's Creed Unity, 100% physical accuracy does not necessarily make for effective gameplay. So Keenan has to solve a complicated puzzle, whether he's designing a map for the original World War II game or for Vietnam.
We do a lot of research before concepting a map, so we will take a look around. Typically the largest battles, they tend to be the easiest to find stuff around, and then we use a lot of Google Earth when it comes to actually locating the battlefields. Thankfully there's a hell of a lot of tactical maps that exist out there that we make use of. There's a lot of aerial photography from the time, and so you can use a lot of that and overlay that on Google Earth and try and line it up as best as you can and see, oh, actually if we put the map here, we'd get a bit of a nice river network, and we would also encapsulate most of a military base or a fortification. We'll go and scour these areas and see, do these river networks work best for us? Do they allow a nice smooth flow from one side of the map to the other? Are there existing road networks we can make use of, or are we going to have to create a lot of them throughout the jungle? Are we able to capture the majority of a base that existed?
The team has also learned to design lessons from open world games, especially when it comes to curating a large space that tells players where they are without constantly needing to reference their map.
One of the main things we take from open world games is their district thing. So if you think of something like Breath of the Wild, you have your different areas that are like the Zora domain and you're all water, and then you go into the Gerudo and it's all different again, or Hyrule Field in the centre, and you know where you are based on the landscape surrounding you and the theme of the area, and that bleeds out and slowly transitions to the other. And so we try and incorporate that into our CP theming, so our control points will build a medical area and then we know we need to fade it out, and so how do we signpost that players are moving towards this without just opening the map and looking at a map while running around the whole time and not looking at the world around them.
As they approach the game's 2026 launch, the developers are still researching aspects of Vietnam that could make it into future updates. Things like different weapons or forces, or maybe even more tanks. The community seems to want more tanks all the time. All based on the artifacts that they studied and histories of the Vietnam War.
We want to include some interest for gameplay, but it is in the forefront of our mind that it needs to be close to the experience that it was at the time. People appreciate having some semblance of what the war was like for the people there, obviously to a lesser extent, not to minimise anybody's involvement in the battles themselves. People want to experience that, to know what it would have been like, and we always do our best to show it in the right light and include that history in there.
It's one of the things that is really enjoyable about the game, is learning about as much of it as you can, and that's a never-ending piece of work. And it's also a great reminder to everyone that these periods of history should be kept alive, and we definitely feel a great weight of responsibility in ensuring that we treat the subject matter both respectfully and with authenticity, whilst keeping it alive in people's minds.